A profound shift is underway in the heart of Europe. Germany, a nation long defined by its economic prowess and post-war military restraint, is undergoing a dramatic transformation. As of 2024, it has ascended to become the largest defense spender in Western Europe, a title it has not held since its reunification. This remarkable development signals more than just a budgetary adjustment. It represents a fundamental rethinking of Germany's role on the world stage. With a military budget surging to approximately $88.5 billion, Germany has now surpassed its long-standing ally, the United Kingdom, and positioned itself as the sixth-largest military spender globally. This is a Germany that is deliberately and methodically rearming. This pivot is not happening in a vacuum. It is a direct response to the seismic shifts in the European security landscape, most notably the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. The move reflects a dawning reality in Berlin that economic influence alone is insufficient to guarantee peace and stability in an increasingly volatile world. The question that now hangs over the continent is a critical one. Are we witnessing the birth of a new European military superpower? Or is this a more measured, if long overdue, step by Europe's economic engine to finally assume its share of the collective security burden? The answers will shape the future of Europe for decades to come. The numbers themselves are staggering and tell a story of rapid change. The nearly 30% increase in defense expenditure in a single year is a clear declaration of intent. For decades, Germany's armed forces, the Bundeswehr, were hampered by underinvestment, a consequence of a deeply ingrained societal and political aversion to military projection. Equipment was often outdated, readiness levels were a source of concern among NATO allies, and the political will to rectify these shortcomings was conspicuously absent. Today, that has been swept away by a new sense of urgency, forcing a national reckoning with its responsibilities as a leading member of the Western Alliance. Understanding this change requires looking beyond the spreadsheets and defense contracts. It demands an examination of the German psyche, its historical memory, and its evolving identity. The journey from a nation constrained by the shadows of its 20th century history to one prepared to lead on matters of European defense is a complex narrative. It involves confronting difficult historical legacies while forging a new path forward. This essay will explore the drivers behind Germany's military makeover, its implications for NATO and the global balance of power, and ultimately seek to determine whether this new chapter marks Germany's rise as a military superpower or its maturation into a more responsible global partner. The catalyst for this monumental shift can be distilled into a single, powerful German word, Zeitenwende. Coined by Chancellor Olaf Scholz in a landmark speech just days after Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, the term translates to a turning point or an end of an era. It signifies a profound and historic policy reversal, acknowledging that the post-Cold War assumptions about European security had been shattered. The speech was not merely rhetoric. It was accompanied by the announcement of a €100 billion special fund dedicated exclusively to the modernization of the German armed forces. This fund was a direct admission that years of neglect had left the Bundeswehr ill-equipped to face the new realities of European geopolitics. This Zeitenwende Fund is the financial engine driving Germany's military renaissance. It is designed to be spent over several years to procure advanced weaponry, replenish depleted ammunition stocks, and invest in next-generation military technology. The shopping list is extensive and includes everything from F-35 fighter jets to heavy transport helicopters and advanced air defense systems. The goal is clear: to transform the Bundeswehr from a force structured primarily for peacekeeping and crisis management missions into one capable of credible, high-intensity territorial defense. This represents the most significant rearmament program in Germany since the end of the Cold War, a clear break from decades of fiscal austerity in defense. The creation of the fund was a political earthquake in Germany. It required amending the country's constitution to bypass its strict debt brake, a move that highlighted the extraordinary sense of crisis felt across the political spectrum. For a nation that has long prided itself on fiscal prudence, carving out such a massive exception for military spending was a powerful signal to both its allies and its adversaries. It demonstrated that when faced with a direct threat to the European order, Germany's political establishment was willing to abandon long-held dogmas. The Zeitenwende was, therefore, as much a psychological turning point as it was a financial one, marking a national consensus on the necessity of a strong military. This initiative is also about rectifying a legacy of chronic underfunding that had become a source of both internal embarrassment and external frustration. Reports of German soldiers training with broomsticks instead of rifles or of grounded aircraft and submarines due to a lack of spare parts had become emblematic of the Bundeswehr's decline. The €100 billion fund is designed to systematically address these deficiencies, ensuring that the armed forces are not only well-equipped, but also fully operational and combat-ready. It is a long-term investment aimed at making Germany the cornerstone of conventional defense in Europe, as Chancellor Scholz articulated, a responsibility Germany is now actively embracing. To fully grasp the significance of Germany's military resurgence, one must understand the deep historical context that has shaped its security policy for over 75 years. In the aftermath of World War II and the horrors of the Nazi regime, West Germany was built on a foundation of profound anti-militarism. Its new constitution and political culture were deliberately designed to prevent the re-emergence of an aggressive military power. The nation adopted a posture of culture of restraint, or Kultur der Zurückhaltung, where military force was seen as a tool of last resort, and any deployment abroad was subject to intense public scrutiny and strict parliamentary approval. This pacifist identity became a core tenet of modern Germany. During the Cold War, West Germany's role was that of a frontline state, but its military, the Bundeswehr, was firmly integrated into the NATO command structure and heavily reliant on the American security guarantee. It was a formidable force, but one without strategic autonomy. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and German reunification in 1990, this trend accelerated. The peace dividend led to drastic cuts in military spending, a significant reduction in the size of the armed forces, and the eventual suspension of conscription in 2011. The prevailing belief in Berlin was that the great power conflicts of the 20th century were over, and Germany's influence would be projected primarily through its economic and diplomatic weight. This deep-seated reluctance to embrace military power often put Germany at odds with its allies, particularly the United States, which for years urged Berlin to meet its NATO spending commitment of 2% of GDP. German leaders frequently resisted these calls, reflecting a broad public consensus that favored social spending over defense. The country's Nazi past cast a long shadow, creating a powerful political and societal taboo against anything that could be perceived as German militarism. Foreign policy was largely driven by the principles of checkbook diplomacy and a preference for dialogue and trade, even with adversarial states like Russia, under the belief that economic interdependence would foster peace and stability. The Zeitenwende represents the dramatic unraveling of this long-held worldview. The war in Ukraine served as a brutal awakening, demonstrating that pacifism and economic ties were not a sufficient defense against raw military aggression. The shift we are witnessing is a move from a deeply ingrained idealism to a starker pragmatism. It is an acknowledgement that in order to defend the liberal democratic values upon which modern Germany was built, the nation must possess a credible military deterrent. This is not a gleeful return to militarism, but a reluctant and sober acceptance of new and dangerous realities, forcing Germany to confront the ghosts of its past in order to secure its future. The war in Ukraine has been the undeniable catalyst for Germany's military transformation, acting as the external shock that shattered decades of established foreign and security policy. Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022 was a direct assault on the European security order that Germany had helped build and from which it had greatly benefited. The invasion invalidated the long-standing German policy of Wandel durch Handel, or change through trade, the belief that economic engagement with Russia would gradually lead to its democratic liberalization and integration into a peaceful European framework. The stark reality of Russian tanks crossing into a sovereign European nation proved this assumption tragically wrong. This brutal awakening forced an immediate and painful reassessment in Berlin. The initial hesitation to provide lethal military aid to Ukraine gave way to a more robust commitment, as Germany became one of the largest suppliers of military and financial support to Kiev. This decision to send weapons into an active conflict zone was a historic break with Germany's post-war policy of not exporting arms to areas of crisis. It marked a clear recognition that the defense of international law and European stability now required more than just diplomatic statements and economic sanctions. The war made the abstract threat of conflict tangible, bringing it to the doorstep of the European Union. The conflict also exposed the precarious state of the Bundeswehr and the vulnerabilities of Germany's own defense posture. Military leaders spoke openly and with unprecedented frankness about the army being bare and unable to fulfill its NATO obligations in the event of a wider conflict. This public admission of weakness, coming from the highest ranks of the military, helped galvanize public and political support for the massive spending increases that followed. The war in Ukraine provided the irrefutable evidence that a well-equipped, combat-ready military was not a luxury, but an absolute necessity for national and collective security in the 21st century. Furthermore, the war has reshaped German public opinion. Before the invasion, there was limited appetite for increased defense spending or a more assertive military role. However, the threat posed by an aggressive and revisionist Russia has led to a significant shift in attitudes. There is now a broader understanding that peace and freedom come at a price, and that Germany must invest in its own defense to protect its values and its allies. The conflict in Ukraine has thus served as a powerful and enduring lesson, forcing Germany to accelerate its journey from a reluctant power to a proactive leader in European security, driven not by ambition, but by a clear and present danger. Germany's military overhaul is, well, fundamentally reshaping its position within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the broader European security architecture. For years, Germany was often seen as a political heavyweight, but, honestly, a military lightweight within the alliance, frequently falling short of the 2% defense spending target agreed upon by member states. Its recent commitment to not only meet but potentially exceed this target has been warmly welcomed by allies, particularly the United States and the frontline states in Eastern Europe. This increased spending transforms Germany from a subject of allied concern into a central pillar of NATO's collective defense strategy against potential Russian aggression. By becoming the biggest European defense spender, Germany is naturally assuming a leadership role. Its investments are not just about numbers, they're really about capability. The procurement of advanced systems like the F-35 fighter jet, which is nuclear capable, ensures Germany can continue to participate in NATO's nuclear sharing arrangements, a key element of the alliance's deterrent. Furthermore, Germany is taking the lead on initiatives like the European Sky Shield, a project to create an integrated European air and missile defense system with other nations. This positions Berlin as a key integrator and enabler of European defense cooperation, strengthening the European pillar within NATO. This renewed commitment is also crucial for the internal cohesion of the alliance. Germany's geographical location at the center of Europe makes it an indispensable logistical hub for moving troops and equipment to the eastern flank. A strong and capable Bundeswehr is, frankly, essential for making NATO's reinforcement plans credible. As Germany strengthens its military, it provides significant reassurance to allies like Poland and the Baltic states, who look to Berlin alongside Washington as a key guarantor of their security. This helps to build trust and solidarity across the alliance at a time of heightened tension, demonstrating that Europe is taking greater responsibility for its own security. However, this enhanced role is not without its challenges. It requires a sustained political will that must endure beyond the current government and, honestly, a cultural shift within the military and society at large. Germany must prove that it can translate increased spending into tangible military capability and operational readiness. Its leadership will be tested not just by its budget, but by its willingness to deploy forces when necessary, and to take on a greater share of the risks associated with collective defense. Germany's actions are therefore being closely watched, as its success or failure in this endeavor will have profound consequences for the future strength and credibility of NATO. While Germany's rise as Europe's top defense spender is a significant regional development, it is important to place this shift within the broader global military context. With its 2024 defense budget of approximately $88.5 billion, Germany now ranks sixth in the world. However, this figure is still dwarfed by the colossal spending of the United States, which remains in a league of its own with a budget approaching $1 trillion. Similarly, China's military expenditure, estimated at over $314 billion, continues its steady and rapid climb, reflecting its ambitions as a global superpower. Germany's spending, therefore, is not an attempt to rival these global giants. Instead, Germany's budget places it in a tier of significant regional powers. It has now surpassed the United Kingdom, whose spending stands at around $81.8 billion, and is significantly ahead of other major European powers like France. This new financial muscle gives Germany considerable weight in shaping European defense policy and procurement decisions. However, its spending is still substantially lower than that of Russia, which, despite having a much smaller economy, has boosted its military budget to an estimated $149 billion, representing a staggering 7.1% of its GDP. This highlights the asymmetric nature of the threat Germany and its allies are facing. The spending figures also reveal the immense strain on the nations directly involved in the conflict. Ukraine, in its desperate fight for survival, spent approximately $64.7 billion on defense, a heroic effort that still amounts to less than half of what its aggressor Russia has allocated to its war machine. This stark imbalance underscores the critical importance of sustained international support for Ukraine, a cause to which Germany has become a major contributor. Germany's own military buildup is, in part, a strategic calculation to bolster its own defense while continuing to provide vital aid to Kiev, balancing immediate needs with long-term security imperatives. Ultimately, Germany's spending surge is not about global power projection in the same vein as the US or China. It is about regional security and deterrence. The goal is to make Germany and Europe strong enough to deter aggression and defend themselves, thereby strengthening NATO as a whole. It represents a shift from a post-Cold War era of low defense investment to a new era where European nations recognize the need to contribute more significantly to their own security. Germany's position in the global rankings is less about climbing a league table and more about assuming the responsibilities that come with being Europe's largest and most powerful economy in a newly dangerous world. Germany's military awakening is sending significant ripples across the Atlantic and is fundamentally reshaping the future of European security. For the United States, a more capable and militarily robust Germany is a long-sought-after goal. For decades, successive American presidents have urged their European allies, and Germany in particular, to shoulder a greater share of the defense burden. Berlin's new commitment to meeting its NATO spending obligations and investing heavily in its armed forces is therefore seen in Washington as a positive and necessary development. It allows the United States to potentially shift more of its strategic focus to other global challenges, such as the Indo-Pacific, knowing that its key European ally is stepping up. This shift also empowers the concept of European strategic autonomy, a goal often championed by France, but one that has historically lacked the crucial backing of Germany's economic and political weight. With Germany now investing heavily in defense, the vision of a stronger, more capable European pillar within NATO becomes far more realistic. This does not necessarily mean a Europe that acts independently of the United States, but rather a Europe that is a more credible and self-reliant partner. A stronger German military strengthens the entire European Union's capacity to act as a security provider, both in its neighborhood and beyond, reducing its over-reliance on American military assets. The implications for the security of Eastern Europe are particularly profound. A militarily strong Germany serves as a powerful deterrent to any potential Russian aggression beyond Ukraine. For countries like Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, which are on the front lines of the alliance, Germany's transformation from a reluctant partner to a committed security guarantor is a source of immense reassurance. German leadership on initiatives like the European Sky Shield and its increasing troop presence on NATO's eastern flank are tangible demonstrations of this new commitment, helping to forge a more cohesive and unified defense posture across the continent. However, this transition is not without potential friction. A more assertive Germany could, at times, have policy disagreements with the United States or other European partners. The process of integrating a more powerful German military into European command structures will require careful political navigation to avoid reviving old fears of German dominance. The key will be for Germany to embed its newfound military strength firmly within the frameworks of NATO and the EU, exercising its leadership collaboratively rather than unilaterally. The success of this balancing act will determine whether Germany's rise strengthens or strains the transatlantic alliance and European unity. In the final analysis, the question of whether Germany is on a path to becoming a military superpower requires a nuanced answer. If superpower implies a nation with global power projection capabilities on par with the United States, a willingness to act unilaterally, and an ambition for global military dominance, then Germany is not, and is not seeking to be, a superpower. The historical, political, and cultural constraints against such a role remain deeply embedded in the German national identity. The current military buildup is not driven by imperial ambition, but by a sober and reluctant acceptance of a changed and more dangerous security environment in its own neighborhood. What we are witnessing is not the rise of a new superpower, but the maturation of a major European power into a more responsible and capable security partner. Germany is finally aligning its military capabilities with its economic weight and political influence. It is shedding its post-Cold War culture of restraint in favor of a culture of responsibility. This involves taking on a leadership role in European defense, investing in the collective security of the NATO alliance, and providing a credible deterrent against aggression. It is a Germany that understands that its own peace and prosperity are inextricably linked to the security and stability of the entire continent. The is less about projecting power outwards and more about building resilience inwards and within Europe. The primary goal is to ensure that Germany and its allies can defend themselves, deter threats, and uphold the international rules-based order that is now under direct assault. This is a defensive, not an offensive, transformation. The focus is on strengthening the European pillar of NATO and ensuring that Europe can act as a more cohesive and effective security actor in partnership with the United States. Germany's leadership is being defined by its willingness to invest, to coordinate, and to bolster collective defense frameworks. Therefore, to label Germany's military makeover as a simple bid for superpower status would be to misread its intentions and misunderstand its historical context. It is a profound and necessary adjustment to a new era of geopolitical competition. Germany is not seeking to dominate Europe, but to defend it. It is stepping up to become the reliable, capable, and responsible partner that its allies have long hoped for. The Germany that is emerging from this is not a new Sparta, but a stronger, more clear-eyed guardian of European security, finally assuming the burdens that come with being the continent's pivotal power.